Hi, everybody. Welcome back after the Shabbat and weekend. And we're in our ongoing adventure in Orot Teshuvah, the lights of repentance of Rav Kook, lights of return. What we saw last time, which was in Perek Zayin, chapter 7, or subsection 7, I should say, in Perek Dalet of the 4th chapter, is that every Jew exists on two levels. We exist in the level of a personal soul, okay? And then we also exist on a level of a collective super soul, okay, simultaneously. So we kind of have like our private soul, and we have a super soul, which is the collective soul of the entire Jewish nation. That soul, of course, is that, like Chabad likes to say, this spark of God from above, which is really doing kind of an injustice to what a soul is. But in any case, the reason I mentioned that idea is because Rav Kook had explained that the super soul is what he calls tzedek hamuchlat, absolute righteousness. Now, it's not absolute righteousness in the sense that the Jewish nation is absolutely righteous, right? Right? Hatzedek, and muchlat means absolutely. Like in modern Hebrew, lahachlit means to decide, because it means to become right. It means to become resolved in one direction. Lahachlit, right? To decide means to right. You're in a state of doubt. You're hovering between two worlds, right? And so to decide means that you go over wholly into one decision. Speaking of making aliyah and making a decision, right? So that's what. So muchlat means absolutely, to be uniformly committed in a certain direction. Okay, so tzedek muchlat, it means absolute righteousness. So does that help linguistically? Yeah. So so it's not a description of the active behavior of the Jewish nation. Like there's no such thing as a Jew who sins, because Rav Kook just said that our super soul is tzedek muchlat, absolute righteousness. What it means is that the spiritual battery which sustains the nation as a whole is a manifestation of divinity, which by definition is tzedek muchlat, absolute righteousness. Now, the point of this is the following: that therefore, in order to be able to change, to grow, to do tshuva, right, to repent, we have to be able to plug in to a source of divinity, of righteousness, divine righteousness, and that socket, as it were, which you plug into, is the super soul of the nation. So that means something really, on a practical level, that means something really interesting. By devoting our energies and identity, I would say the opposite, in order, our identity and therefore our energies, right, to the nation as a whole, right? I think then that is actually the first step necessary in changing, because you've got to tap into those transforming waves of righteousness in order to go. You need to plug in, and then that energy comes and acts as a facilitator towards becoming more righteous. Where's that socket, right? That socket is the super soul of the nation as a whole. That's why I think I mentioned last time, the notion of, I'm going to be a Torah Jew, but I'm going to live in Patagonia. I think there's a place with that name. So that doesn't work. And there are cases like this. I have this really good friend whose grandfather was a super famous rabbi, and he had a bunch of sons. So it's my friend's grandfather, and then this grandfather had a bunch of sons. So one of those sons is my friend's father, and then there are other brothers, right? My friend's uncles. One of them became a sheep farmer in the middle of nowhere, but he's like a 100% Torah Jew. It's like it's not very nice to criticize somebody, but it's just weird. It always struck me as being weird, and it is weird.
He's living like King David, but he never comes back to the ranch.
Yeah, very nice image, right? You can't do it. You can't go in a cave someplace.
You're not connected with other Jews.
You're not connected with the nation, right? And I think I mentioned last time, that that's why when we deal with conversion, we always insist they move into the Eruv. If people make a mistake, they think that even I make a mistake. I didn't, deal with this particular case properly. That, like people think it's just a practical thing. Like if you don't move into the Eruv, like why such an arbitrary thing? Like an Eruv has particular geographic parameters, right? Like what if a person is 1 block outside of the Eruv? Like, oh, no good anymore. Because it's not so much a practical thing of, oh, I got to make sure the person keeps Shabbat. So therefore, by living in the Eruv, the chances of keeping Shabbat are better, because it's hard to keep Shabbat if you don't live in the Eruv.
You're putting a stumbling block, I think, for the blind. If you tell them you're fine, even though you're outside the Eruv, it could be looked at as possibly a stumbling block.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
But we become a nation. We're becoming part of a people, and we have to live amongst them.
Thank you. That's exactly my point. Would you please take over? Right, exactly. Right, that's what I'm trying to say. That it's not just a technical thing to help you keep Shabbat. It's that by moving into the Eruv is a kind of just a physical, practical way of expressing and feeling and experiencing the idea that I'm part of the nation as a whole. It's tapping into the super soul, and then those waves that you get by tapping the super soul create this kind of incredible energy. Now, a thought just occurred to me, it's a little controversial. Never do what I'm about to do, because it's just like occurred to me just like this. In Israel, I can always erase this video. It's kind of good. You can go on afterwards, and YouTube has this ability to just delete it. So
That's a good thing.
yeah, thank God. So there's a big controversy in Israel now, what to do about thousands and thousands of people who came and made Aliyah to Israel. They're not Jewish though, and we're not talking about like former evangelicals from Mississippi who decided to move to Israel. We're talking about Jews from the former Soviet Union, or not Jews actually. In the former Soviet Union, there's a lot of intermarriage. And so there are a lot of people that have a Jewish father, say, but not a Jewish mother, or even sometimes not, not even that. It could be like going back a generation or two. And in Israel, as you may know, because we have here people who are planning on Bezrat Hashem to make Aliyah, in terms of getting Israeli citizenship, you don't have to be Jewish, right? You can actually it's this weird historical thing that I believe that the law of return, which is the civil legal framework under which you can get Israeli citizenship, I think basically says something like, I don't know if it says in this language, but if Hitler considered you Jewish enough to want to kill you, then that's good enough for the state of Israel to want to accept you. Okay? So you don't have to be halachically Jewish in order to make Aliyah. Okay? It helps, but it's not. Okay? So that's why we have thousands and thousands of people in Israel. They're not Jewish. But this is already, the big wave of immigration to Israel already, it's already a generation old, right? So you have people who were born in Israel or came to Israel when they were very small children. So they're completely Israeli, right? Native Hebrew speakers, serve in the army. They happen to not be Jewish.
Open pork stores.
Yeah, that happens too, right? Not so much with the children. It's already the parents got used to eating pork right? So, they're familiar with all the holidays, and they live in Israel. You just become part of your sort of cultural wallpaper. So what do you do with all of them? So that's a big controversy in Israel, very big controversy in Israel. Because there are, within the Orthodox world, because there's some rabbis that say this is like a time bomb. Because if we don't figure out some way to making them Jewish, then there's going to be a very big problem of who's Jewish,
Right.
Because it becomes pretty hard to know, right? And then you get the whole problem of intermarriage, and then once you start getting intermarriage, then you really don't know who's Jewish, and it's a whole disaster. So because of this concern, which everybody's concerned with, I mean, everybody's concerned with the issue. The question is, what do you do about it? So some rabbis say maybe we need to be more flexible, or whatever term you want to use, with regards to conversion. Generally speaking, when it comes to conversion, there's an irony, and that is that it's much harder to become Jewish than to be born Jewish. That sounds a little self-evidently silly, right? Of course it is. And one of the great struggles psychologically and emotionally for a prospective convert is they look around in a synagogue, let's say, and the standards of commitment that are expected of them to convert are much higher than almost everybody who's Jewish that they see around them. Like, people are driving to shul, or not necessarily keeping very high standards of kashrut and laws of modesty and all these kinds of things. And the rabbis like telling them, look, in order to become a Jew, you have to this is the way we live and the way we think. But that person looks around and says, huh? No one else is living that way. What am I supposed to be, the Pope? It's like, I'm holier than it's ridiculous. So, usually the convert doesn't say it because they're polite and they don't want to make waves, but I can imagine feeling it in the heart. Like, this isn't fair. It creates a lot of confusion and frustration. So therefore, there are rabbis in Israel that say, maybe we don't have to be too exacting, as long as the person says that, they want to live as a Jew, but we're not going to really make sure that they keep kosher and keep Shabbat and make sure the children are educated Jewishly, etc. So it is dangerous, and this approach is very controversial. There's a lot of fights going on in Israel now. This is a big hot button issue. Is that the expression? So then there are other rabbis that say that sometimes the cure is worse than the illness. Mm-hmm. God forbid, like chemotherapy, it's like trying to help the person, you end up killing the person, right? So some rabbis say, how is that fixing things to make a bunch of Jews, if they're Jewish at all, through a conversion like that, who aren't committed to Judaism really, right? Why is that fixing it, right? So that itself is a huge problem. But I just want to add into the brew of this whole question this issue that we just discussed right now, which that some rabbis on the more liberal side of the equation, which I just described, say, wait a second, if a person feels wholly committed, with a W, holy, I guess maybe holy with an H too, committed to the nation, as a nation, because like I mentioned before, some of these people from the former Soviet Union either came as children or are born in Israel. Now it's already, enough time has passed. We're not people born in Israel. They're completely identified with Israel, right? They serve in the army with pride, and actually observe the holidays. Because in Israel, kind of like lahavdil, like a person may have a Christmas tree in America. It's like they're not necessarily Christians, right? In Israel, like a person will light a menorah or whatever it may be. It's like it's just kind of part of the way you do things. They're not necessarily doing it in the sense of being commanded by Hashem as a Jew, right? They even don't really even understand that they may not be Jewish. It's like kind of they're part of Israel. So it's interesting, according to this, that the fact that they're tapping into this collective of the Jewish nation, identify deeply with it, is that, I'm not answering the question, I'm just asking it, is that per se a reason to be more lenient, to say, wait a second, like that's like half of what it means to be a Jew, is that fundamental identification. And not just identification, I mean, it's tachlis, as they say in Yiddish. The person is serving in the army, willing to give their life for other Jews, right? It's not just lip service. They're living every day among the Jewish people with identification with the Jewish people. Should that itself be reason to be a little bit more expansive in the way we handle conversion? So I don't know the answer to that question. I'll leave that to, bless you, we'll leave that to the great Torah sages who
What about
decide these things.
But what about making the same requirements, but making the making it more easy to just do? I mean, like, I know that
Like more user friendly, but not.
people that go through converted. I don't know how what it was like with you, but in this country, it seems totally unpredictable.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very good point.
And when people do this, some people have an easier road, some people have a horribly difficult
Right.
road, and there are many phone calls that aren't answered.
Right.
They're agreed appointments, but they don't. The rabbi doesn't come in. I don't want to say this or either, but
No,
but
that's not one of my problems.
but
Not personally.
but what I'm saying is that if we could, I'm saying that what I think, and maybe this is what should happen anyway. I don't know, but just make it, like you said, more user friendly. You're requiring that they need to do all the Froom things and read all the material and know all the material, but don't make it so difficult. And also financially, there's a lot of it's very expensive. What if somebody is poor?
Right.
You know, I know somebody in Georgia that says, "Well, you can't be poor and convert." Well, why not? I mean, or why? You have to be wealthy. You have to be able to afford a Jewish day school for their children, and they're struggling. So I mean, I don't know. Just to make it more user friendly, but you're still requiring.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you're making, Levi Abraham. That's a very important point. So I'll just repeat it because I don't know if the microphone picked that up. What Levi Abraham is suggesting is that not to relax the standards, but to make it a process which is more inviting and more compassionate and predictable, etc. Like, you can have the exact same standards, but with a smile, with a warmth. That the rabbinate, the system which processes conversion, can be a more compassionate system without necessarily relaxing standards. Is that a fair restatement of what you're saying? I think that's an important point. There's an organization in Israel which is controversial, and it's weighing in more on the liberal side of this issue, but called Sohar. And the original impetus, as far as I understand, of this organization was kind of a similar thing, and that is it processes marriages. These are all Orthodox rabbis, and they, getting married in Israel, for many Israelis who are not necessarily identified with a synagogue, they're not so religious. So basically, they're sent a kind of like bureaucrat rabbi, like who they don't know, they never talked to before. The rabbi comes, he comes like late to the chuppah. Okay, what's the name of this couple? It's like, I mean, almost literally, this is kind of worst case scenario. And so it's very impersonal and not inspiring. So this organization, Sohar, got together and said, look, let's do the exact same thing. I mean, we're not going to relax. The wedding is going to be 100% kosher, no funny business. It's going to be all 100% the right way to do it. But how about we meet with the couple beforehand, get to know them? How about when we speak under the chuppah, that is not a canned speech, right? That it has something to do with them because I got to know them a little bit as a rabbi, etc. So in that particular narrow example, that would be, sort of an example of what you're saying, that you can accomplish the same goals, not change the standards whatsoever, but to do it with a heart and with a certain sense of humanity and decency. So I think that's a very important point. Okay, so let's now go on to Parakhet, and we'll just be able to read one sentence. Actually, I don't even know if we can read one sentence. Actually, are we out of time?
We're supposed to be started at 6:30 today. What time is it?
Yeah, so it's, we'll read one sentence. So this is chapter 4, subsection 8. Kodemet lechol minei tshuvot shehin baot achareha hi tshuva el kod Hashem. What precedes all types of tshuva, what comes first before anything else, is a tshuva to the glory of God. Okay, Now, the question is, what does he mean that the first step of tshuva is a tshuva to the glory of God? With that teaser, no spoilers here, we're going to let you sleep on that. And Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we will then dig into this chapter. And I'm glad we had a little bit of a digression because it's an important topic. But tomorrow we'll continue with that first sentence there. Okay, everybody have a wonderful day. Take care.